friends, I am Shivani Raikwar. Today we will be dealing with an interesting episode of B.Pharma. The title of our topic is Hallucinogens in Medicinal Chemistry 2nd of 6th semester. Expert of this topic is Karuna Thete, Senior Patent Analyst, Eco Solutions Private Limited, Mumbai. First of all, we will go through some basic introductions related to hallucinogens and then in detail mechanism of action for the drugs. In this chapter, we describe different types of hallucinogens. Module 1, Introduction to Hallucinogens. Module 2, Classification of Hallucinogens. Module 3, Mechanism of Action. Module 4, Medicinal uses of hallucinogens, and Module 5, Summary. Now, Module 1, Introduction to Hallucinogens. Psychotomimetic drugs, also referred to as psychedelic or hallucinogenic drugs, affect thought, perception and mood without causing marked psychomotor stimulation or depression. Thoughts and perceptions tend to become distorted and dreamlike, rather than being merely sharpened or dulled, and the change in mood is likewise more complex than a simplex shift in the direction of euphoria or depression. Importantly, psychotomimetic drugs do not cause dependence or addiction, even though their psychological effects overlap those of highly addictive major psychostimulants such as cocaine and amphetamines. Hallucinogens are natural and synthetic, synthesized substance that when ingested or taken into the body significantly alters one's state of consciousness. Hallucinogenic compounds often cause people to see or think they see random colors, patterns, events and objects that do not exist. People sometimes have a different perception of time and space, hold imaginary conversations, believe they hear music and experience smells, taste and other sensations that are not real. Unlike such drugs as barbiturates and amphetamines, which depresses or speed up the central nervous system respectively. Hallucinogens are not physically addictive. Habit forming, people can become psychological dependent upon them. However, the real danger of hallucinogens is not their toxicity or their poison level, but their unpredictability. People have had such varied reactions to these substances, especially to LSD, that is lysergic acid diethylamide, that it is virtually impossible to predict the effect of a hallucinogen will have any given individual effects depend upon the person's mood, surroundings, personality and expectations when taking the drug. Some users of hallucinogens have reported feeling mystical and insightful, while others are fearful, paranoid, or excessively suspicious or mistrustful of others, and hysterical, that is, exhibiting overwhelming or unmanageable fear or emotional excitability. Medicine, man, shamans, and other spiritual leaders have used natural hallucinogens found in plants and mushrooms since ancient times, believing in their power to help contact the spiritual world or mystical beings for guidance in serving their people. Pollen from flowers and other plants, most with medicinal properties, was found in the grave of a Neanderthal man in Shanidar, Iraq. Scientists believe that since these prehistoric people very likely knew how to use plants for medicine, they probably used hallucinogenic plants in rituals. Archaeological evidence also shows that psychoactive drugs Drugs that affect the mind or behavior were used in ancient Egypt, Greece, Europe, and many other countries. Natural hallucinogens are formed in dozens of psychoactive plants, including the peyote cactus, various species of mushrooms, and the bark and seeds of several trees and plants. In Mexico, mushrooms called Psilocybe mexicana, which contain the fungi psilocybin and psilocin, have been used in religious rituals since the time of the Aztec civilization, that is, before 1519, an empire in Central America noted for its advanced social development. In Europe, the fungus Amanita muscaria was thought to have been used by the Vikings. Amanita muscaria and its closest relative Amanita pantherina are also found in the United States. Both contain psychoactive ingredients called ibotenic acid and mucimol. Some members of the Native American Church, an organization made up of Native Americans from tribes throughout North America, practice the use of mescaline, a form of psychedelic drug found in the peyote cactus. Currently, peyote is the only psychedelic agent that has been authorized by the federal government for limited use during Native American religious ceremonies. DMT, dimethyltryptamine, is a hallucinogen found in the seeds of certain West Indian and South American plants. People in Haiti have used this drug in the form of a snuff, a tobacco product inhaled through the nostrils, chewed or placed against the gums, called cohoba in religious ceremonies. Marijuana, LSD and PCP. Marijuana and hashish, two substances derived from the hemp plant, Cannabis sativa, are also considered natural hallucinogens, although their potency or power is very low when compared to other marijuana, also called grass, pot, tea, weed or reefer. A green herb from the flower of the hemp plant is considered a mild hallucinogen. Hashish is marijuana in a more potent, concentrated form. Both drugs are usually smoked. Their effects include a feeling of relaxation, faster heart rate, the sensation that time is passing more slowly, and a greater sense of hearing, taste, touch, and smell. Even the most potent of these naturally occurring hallucinogens is not nearly as powerful and unpredictable as the synthetic hallucinogen LSD, which is chemically derived from ergot, a parasitic fungus that grows on rye and other grains. LSD became well known in the 1960s when many people sought spiritual enlightenment through the use of drugs. The drug phencyclidine or PCP, known as angel dust and rocket fuel, was widely abused in the late 1970s. PCP is dangerous because it produces a sense of indifference about the world and a reduced sensitivity to pain. Combined with hallucinogenic effects, it can result in bizarre thinking and violently destructive behavior. Now, coming to Module 2, Classification of Hallucinogens. Many types of substances are classified as hallucinogens solely because of their capacity to produce such hallucinations. These substances are sometimes called as psychedelic or mind-expanding drugs. They are generally illegal to use in the United States, but are sometimes sold on the street by drug dealer. A few hallucinogens have been used in medicine to treat certain disorders, but they must be given under controlled circumstances. Hallucinogens found in plants and mushrooms were used by humans for many centuries in spiritual practice worldwide. Overall, three types of hallucinogens exist. First, psychedelic, second, dissociatives, and third, deliriants. First, psychedelics. Under normal conditions, the brain uses a selection process that determines how a person perceives his or her surroundings. In fact, this process filters out certain aspects so a person can attain to a particular task or activity. Psychedelic hallucinogens strip away the selection process so users experience everything in their surroundings. Drugs belonging to this type of hallucinogen include LSD, peyote, and mescaline. When high users experience an overwhelming sense of expansion where colors, sounds, smells, and textures become world of their own. Seeing visions and hearing voices are also common. Second, dissociatives. The brain's ability to translate sensory perception enables a person to experience his or her immediate environment. Dissociative hallucinogens create a state of sensory deprivation when the mind is free to create its own internal environment and perceptions. Drugs belonging to this type of hallucinogen include magic mushrooms, PCP, ketamine, and DXM. While drug effects can vary from dose to dose and drug to drug, dissociative effects generally produce an out-of-body type experience that leaves users in a trance state. Third is deliriants. Unlike the other two types of hallucinogen, deliriants' drug effect create false perception that have no basis in a person's internal or external reality. Users enter into a stupor-like state of confusion. Deliriant type of drugs include dhatura, deadly nightshade, and Jimson weed. A person may start to hold conversation with imaginary people or go through the motion of completing a complex task like getting dressed without ever having picked out the clothes. In fact, deliriants create a psychotic state of mind where users can't distinguish between reality and fantasy. Furthermore, according to chemical structure, resemblance hallucinogens can be grouped into indole ethylamine derivative. There is a structural resemblance to 5-HT. Examples include dimethyltryptamine, psilocybin, etc. Phenylethylamine derivatives, there is a structural resemblance to norepinephrine and dopamine. Examples include mescaline. Cannabinoids, these chemicals are called cannabinoids because they are related to chemicals found in the marijuana plant such as delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, that is THC. Now coming to module 3, mechanism of action. Psychotomimetic drugs or hallucinogens are grouped into two categories depending on mechanism of action. First, drugs that act on 5-HT transporter or receptors. Lysergic acid diethylamide, psilocybin and mescaline, which are agonists at 5-HT2 receptor, and MDMA, that is ecstasy, which acts mainly by inhibiting 5-HT uptake. MDMA also acts on many other receptors and transporters and has powerful psychostimulant effects typical of amphetamines, as well as psychotomimetic effects. Antagonists at NMDA type glutamate receptors, example phencyclidine. Serotonin also interacts with two other key neurotransmitter chemicals known as dopamine and norepinephrine. Different types of hallucinogens may produce varying effects in terms of how serotonin influences dopamine and norepinephrine secretions. Taking hallucinogens can cause sweating, excessive salivation, decreased heart rate, increased blood pressure, and change in pupil size. LSD users may experience flashbacks of visions they had when on the drug. Some LSD users suffer organic brain damage which results in impaired memory and attention span, confusion and difficulty in thinking. Some scientists believe hallucinogens affect serotonin in the brain. Recently, several hallucinogenic compounds have been found to resemble serotonin structurally. One theory is at least some drug-induced hallucinations are due to changes in the functioning of serotonin neurons. It was demonstrated that LSD interfered with the transmitted action of serotonin. Table 1. LSD, that is agonist at 5-HT2A receptors, and it has no clinical use but used as drug abuse. MDMA, it releases 5-HT and blocks reuptake. It has no clinical use but important as drug of abuse. Mescaline, not known as chemically but similar to amphetamine. It has no chemical use. Psilocybin, chemically it is related to 5-HT but probably act on 5-HT receptors. It has no clinical use. Phencyclidine, chemically similar to ketamine, blocks NMDA receptor operated ion channels, also block sigma receptors. It is originally proposed as an anesthetic, now important as drug of abuse and as a model of schizophrenia. Now coming to module 4, medicinal uses of hallucinogens. Hallucinogens have been studied for possible medicinal uses, including the treatment of some forms of mental illness, alcoholism and addiction to the drug opium. They have also been given to dying patients. Most of these users have been abandoned, however. A synthetic form of the active chemical in marijuana, that is THC, has been approved for prescription use by cancer patients who suffer from severe nausea after receiving chemotherapy, that is treating a cancer with drugs. THC is also used to reduce eye pressure in treating severe cases of glaucoma. PCP is occasionally used by veterinarians as an anesthetic and sedative for animals. As a group, the hallucinogen drugs distort a person's perception or reality in one way or another. Different types of hallucinogens distort a person's perception in different ways. Distortions in perception result from alteration in the brain chemical processes and functions, according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse. In fact, each type of hallucinogen targets certain specific chemical processes, which accounts for the different trips or highs user experience. Hallucinogens in general come from plants, mushrooms, and synthetically made formulas, all of which contain varying consistencies of the drug. As a result, any one type of hallucinogen can produce one or more of the following effects: rapid changes in mood, auditory hallucinations, visual hallucinations, and tactile hallucinations. Positive lysergic acid diethylamide, that is LSD, plus lysergic acid diethylamide, both an indole ethylamine group and a phenylethylamine group, can be seen in the structure of the extraordinary potent hallucinogen lysergic acid diethylamide. The stereochemistry is exceedingly important. Chirality must be maintained or activity is lost. Likewise, the location of the double bond as shown in the figure. Experimentally, LSD has marked effects on serotonergic and dopaminergic neurons. The basis for all of its complex CNS actions are not completely understood. However, recently its actions have been suggested as being more typical of schizophrenic psychotic reactions than the model based on amphetamine. Occasionally, LSD produces a syndrome that is extremely disturbing to the subject, that is the bad trip, in which the hallucinatory experience takes on a menacing quality and may be accompanied by paranoid delusions. This sometimes goes so far as to produce homicide or suicide attempts. And in many respects, the state has features in common with acute schizophrenic illness. The physical effects of hallucinogens are considered small compared to their effects on the mind. Death from an overdose of hallucinogens is highly unlikely, but deaths have resulted from accidents of suicides involving people under the influence of LSD. The drug made them so indifferent to the world around them they thought they could step out of a window, for example, without harm. LSD is sold on the street in various forms, sometimes on a piece of paper marked into squares, with each square being one dose. Now, psilocybin. Psilocybin is the phosphoric acid ester of psilocin and appears to be converted to psilocin as the active species in vivo. It occurs in a mushroom, Psilocybe mexicana. Both drugs are active orally with a short duration of action. Synthetic alpha-methyl substituted relatives have a much longer duration of action and enhanced oral potency. This suggests that psilocin is metabolized by methyl oxidase inhibitors. Psilocybin has very similar properties to LSD. The psychotomimetic effects of all three drugs are the same. Mescaline 3,4,5-trimethoxyphenethylamine is a much studied hallucinogen with many complex effects on the CNS. It occurs in the peyote cactus. It is chemically related to amphetamine and acts as an inhibitor of monoamine transport. In addition to its agonist action on 5-HT2 receptors, the oral dose required for its hallucinogenic effects is very high, as much as 500 mg of the sulfate salt. The low oral potency probably results from facile metabolism of MAO. Alpha methylation increases CNS activity. Synthetic alpha methyl substituted relatives are more potent. The presence of methoxyl or dioxymethylene, that is methylene dioxy substituents on a 2-phenylethylamine system is a characteristic of many psychotomimetic compounds and strongly suggests dopamine involvement. MDMA is 3,4-methylene dioxymethamphetamine is an amphetamine derivative with complex effects on monoamine function. It inhibits monoamine transporters, principally the 5-HT transporter, and also releases 5-HT, the net effect being a large increase in free 5-HT in certain brain regions followed by depletion. Similar but smaller changes occur in relation to dopamine and noradrenaline. MDMA is widely used as a party drug because of the euphoria, loss of inhibition and energy surge that it induces. Although not addictive, MDMA carries serious risk, both acute and long term. The after effects of MDMA persist for a few days and comprise depression, anxiety, irritability and increased aggression, the midweek blues. There is also evidence of long-term deleterious effect on memory and cognitive function in heavy MDMA users. Phencyclidine PCP was introduced as a dissociative anesthetic for animals. Its close structural relative, ketamine, is still so used and may be used in humans. In humans, PCP produces a sense of intoxication, hallucinogenic experiences, and often amnesia. The drug affects many systems, including those of norepinephrine, dopamine, and 5-hydroxytryptamine. It has been proposed that PCP and certain other psychotomimetics produces a unique pattern of activation of ventral tegmentation area, dopaminergic neurons. It blocks glutaminergic and methyl D-aspartate, that is NMDA receptors. This action is the basis for many of its CNS effects. PCP itself appears to be the active agent. The psychotic state produced by this drug is also cited as a better model than amphetamine psychosis for the psychotic state of schizophrenia. Phencyclidine is now of interest mainly as a drug of abuse, which is also called as angel dust, now declining in popularity. Coming to cannabinoids. Cannabinoids are a class of diverse chemical compounds that act on cannabinoid receptor in cells that repress neurotransmitter release in the brain. Ligands for these receptor protein include the endocannabinoids produced naturally in the body by humans and animals, the phytocannabinoids found in cannabis and some other plants, and synthetic cannabinoids. The most notable cannabinoids is the phytocannabinoids. Tetrahydrocannabinol, that is THC, the primary psychoactive compound in cannabis. Cannabidiol, that is CBD, is another major constituent of the plant. There are at least 113 different cannabinoids isolated from cannabis, exhibiting varied effects. Delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol, that is delta 9 THC. Now coming to the structure activity relationship, SAR. Essentially a benzopyrene structure with an aromatic hydroxyl group at C1 position and an alkyl or alkyl ether group at C3 position in a requirement for activity. In general, changing the above substitution pattern leads to a major loss of potency. Although a benzopyrene ring is a definite requirement for activity, the benzopyrene by itself does not confer activity. The position and the environment around the aromatic hydroxyl group are very important for activity. That is, the OH at position C1 is in itself necessary for activity. Thus, the abnormal compounds where the hydroxyl and the side chain have been interchanged, that is side chain at C1 and OH at the C3, are all inactive. Similarly, removal of OH at C1 eliminates activity. Esterification of OH at C1 retains activity. Etherification of the OH at C1 eliminates activity. Replacement of the OH by NH retains activity and replacement by SH eliminates activity. Since C10 in the alicyclic ring C is in close proximity to the OH group, a methyl substitution at C10 significantly alters the activity in the case of a planar 5-membered C ring. Substitution in the aromatic ring by electronegative group like carboxyl, carbomethoxyl and acetyl groups eliminates activity, whereas alkyl or hydroxyl group at C2 position retain and in C4 position reduces the activity. A minimum length of the aromatic side chain is necessary to elicit activity and the branching of the alkyl side chain increases potency. Thus, 1,2-dimethyl heptyl or 1,1-dimethyl heptyl gives the most potent compound. Similarly, parafluorophenyl alkyl and side chain as shown below retain good activity. On ring B, removal of the gem dimethyl group at C6 decreases activity. Replacement of one of the geminal methyl group at C6 by a hydroxymethyl group retains activity. 12-beta hydroxy delta 9 THC is an active as delta 9 THC. Replacement of pyrene O by N ring expansion of ring B by 1 carbon can retain activity. In the alicyclic ring C compound with the double bond in the delta 9 and delta 8 or delta 6A, 10A position are active. It is noteworthy that compounds with a double bond in the delta 10, 10A position are also active, but only a few examples are available at present. A 6A, 10A trans junction increases and acid junction decreases activity. The natural THCs are active in the 10AR and 6AR series only. Methyl at C9 increases its optimum for activity, but metabolism to 11-hydroxymethyl is not a prerequisite for THC activity. Since G-nor-delta 8 THC is active, compounds are active even when no double bonds are present in the ring. Example, the HHCs. In these compounds, an equatorial group at C9 increases activity and an axial group decreases activity. Furthermore, the activity is retained even when a diverse group is present, such as an epoxide, a ketone, or an alcohol. The C ring can be substituted by a variety of nitrogen and sulfur containing rings without loss of activity. With the nitrogen and sulfur analogues, the most active central nervous system agents are obtained when the heteroatom is in fan-ethyl orientation. Example, inserted in place of C7 or C9. Planarity of the C ring is not a necessary criterion for activity. In both carboxylic and heterocyclic analogues, opening the pyrene ring generally decreases activity. The negative enantiomers of cannabinoids are more active than the positive enantiomers. Now coming to module 5, summary. A huge number of physiologically active substances exhibit stimulatory action on the central nervous system. However, the number of drugs used for this purpose in medicine is extremely limited. Psychotomimetic drugs are LSD, psilocybin and mescaline, 2,5-HT receptors and catecholamines. MDMA, phencyclidine, cannabinoids. Their main effect is to cause sensory distortion of a fantastic and hallucinatory nature. So students, isn't it an interesting and informative topic? I hope all of you enjoyed it. So it's time to test what you have understand from this topic. So have fun solving the test on the topic. This is Shivani Raikwar saying you goodbye and see you in the next episode. Thank you.